So now let's continue with more details about different beam mobility in 5G massive MIMO. So again, the first type where I'm going to cover, it's about the intra-cell mobility beam switching. As you can see, this is intra-cell mobility beam switching. And as I highlighted, intra-cell beam mobility switching can be both transparent and seamless from the UE perspective, where actually the UE can be instructed by the GNB, can be set to generate periodic CSI reports with report quantity for example, CSI-RSRP, which is integrating for CRI-RSRP, this one, which is again a CSI reference signal resource indicator, or other something called SSB-RI, which is integrating SSB block resource indicator. What it means by this, it means that the GMB will be delivering within RRC reconfiguration message the report quantity, telling the UE I will require you to report either the CRI or SSB RI to be able to judge which beam you are going to serve from. For example, let's assume the user is moving from one SSB beam to another in connected mode, or from one CSI-RS beam to another CSI-RS beam also in connected mode. So the GMB will know based on the reporting information which beam is going to be served for this particular UE. So these indicators, which is highlighted here, will be provided by the base station, and based on that, the GMB can use this information to switch between beams without informing the UE. And actually, can be done by changing the set of beamforming weights, which are applied to the resource blocks allocated to either the PDCCH or PDSCH. I will explain this one now with more visualization and so on. So we can summarize it into few steps. So let's now try to visualize and see what we have. So the first step, GMB will be delivering the bottom right message here in RSC configuration message, telling him, for example, I would like the U report quantity for the beam switching or intra-cell mobility beam switching to be big. For example, I would like you to report both even SSB or RI or CRI. So, for example, in this case, was telling him, I would like you to report SSB-Index-RSRP. But in the case you are highlighting here, the user will be changing from one CSRI beam to another CSRI beam. So the user will require to report this CRI. So initially, in this figure, the user was being served, reported initially that I would like to camp in CRI1, which is CSRS1, beam 1. So GNB in this case will start calculating the beam weighting, would do the beam weight calculation, and it will assign the particular resource blocks and the particular beam towards the user, which is PDSCH beam and traffic beam and so on. So the GMB, based on this information, will know that, for example, this beam is associated with a specific PDSCH beam and so on. Then after a while, the user changed his location. He moved, for example, towards another beam direction. Let's say another this CSRS beam within the same cell, which is again intra-cell mobility handover. So what will happen? The user in this case will do again another CSI reporting. Will report the new CRI, which should be equivalent to CRI number 3, as you can see here. So in this case, again, the GMB will start doing the new calculation to start. This can be associated, by the way, with another information like PMI and so on, as we discussed before in previous session. But in this case, GMB will start doing the beam calculation, and it will start allocating the new traffic beams based on the reported information. And all of this, the beam changing for the traffic beams, will be seamless and transparent to the UE. The GMB doesn't require to send, for example, any RRC message or anything else to let the UE know which one is being changed or which traffic beam is going to be used. So now, based on this information, the GMB will do the calculation of the beam weight calculation and will assign the new resource blocks and new beam of the traffic PDSCH beam and so on. And again, all of this is happening through the L1 and in the L1 and L2 procedures, and it doesn't require any involvement of RRC signaling, except in the very beginning, whenever the GMB is delivering the report quantity and the other information to the UE. Actually, the base station, the basic beam switching scenario in general can be enhanced using something called TCI, or a set of transmission configuration indicator. This is TCI, stands for transmission configuration indicator. So the beams sorry, beam switching scenario can be enhanced using a set of transmission configuration indicator (TCI) states to specify something called quasi co-location or QCL relation between the PDCCH and the reference signals, and also between the PDCH and downlink reference signals. Again, I will be covering this one in complete differentiation because it requires additional information, but just to let you know, 3GPP introduced the concept of a QCL relation, which is this one, to help the UE with its channel estimation. I will be explaining this one in more details, but just in information, additional information sent to the UE to help him with its channel estimation, frequency offset estimation, and also other reference signal and so on. This one will be covered in more details in next session, but let's try to get an example from drive test logs now. Whenever the user, for example, change the SSB beam, how this beam happening, what kind of information is going to be reported from the UE to GMB, and how GMB will be changing the beam and so on. So let's move to the next slide as an additional practical information for the intra-cell mobility beam switching. So this example is mainly covering a scenario from the drive test perspective. This is about whenever you have changing, for example, your serving SSB beam, the GMB, for example, changing from SSB beam to another SSB beam. So, for example, just to quickly recap, in general, the number of SSB beams which can be transmitted to the user. This is depend on the vendor implementation, but in general, 3GPP defined for frequency range 1 maximum as 8 SSB beams can be transmitted. So this you can confirm from your network based on, for a standalone, based on system information block type 1, you'll find something called, if you zoom in here, you'll find something called here SSB position, and under this one you find something called N1 group. If all it having 8 bits, as you can see, if all of them is 1, this means you have active 8 SSB beams. In case if they are 4, this means they are 4. In case if they are only 1 and the remaining are 0, this means you have only 1. So here I'm assuming you have 8 SSB beams, and again the GMB will be delivering some information to let the user to instruct the user to report the coverage and the RSRP through the L1, L2 message, and the beam index as well, which is SSB-RI, to tell them to let the GMB to the UE to report this information to the GMB. So this is how the information will be reported. As you can see in this example in the middle here, the UE will report the SSB beam index, which is SSB beam index, which is BRI, with the strongest RSRP through L1 and L2 messages. So here is just this is from the draft test logs. GMB will being able to see this kind of information, which is including SSB beam index, for example 0 to 1 and 6, and each of these index representing a different beam in the cell. So here each beam you'll see that it's having a different coverage. So based on that, the GMB will know which one is the best. For example, in this particular example, the best beam was beam number 0, which have a coverage of -91 dB, while the other is kind of far away. Only SSB beam 6 was nearby, but this is the best one. So in this case, but it have different RS antenna, so you can average all of them to see which one is the best. But at the very end, we are assuming here SSB beam index is 0. So, but whenever the user is moving to another beams, the GMB will decide which one is going to be used as a transmission point of view for this particular view. So it will understand also where the user are located. So for example, here just from drive test, each color representing again a beam index. So we'll find whenever the user is moving, the beam will be changing. For example, here different color, green, red, and so on. So this is how the GMB will switch this is beam based on the reported L1 RSRP and SRBI, SSB-RI from the UE. This is a type here. This was all about the intra-cell mobility handover. And that's all about today's video. Again, I hope if you like the video to press like and to share the information and to spread the knowledge. And thank you very much and see you in the next video.